Hey everyone, just trying something a little different. Instead of doing a let's play, I want to sort of talk about a game I recently played and my thoughts about it. This isn't a review exactly, as much as it is my own musings on my experience with the game. Recently I picked up and played AM2R, or another Metroid 2 remake, which the title is really interesting, considering this is the first Metroid 2 remake I've been made aware of. So calling it another Metroid 2 remake feels a little strange, but the internet is big, so maybe there was one that came out first. Anyway, no, I'm not going to rant about how the game was taken down by a DMCA claim. Everyone else is already doing that, and I don't really feel the need. In addition, I don't really enjoy being angry, and I want this video to be more positive. More to the point, I do feel kind of bad for the creators who spent so much time on the project. But considering the head of the project himself requested fans not be upset at Nintendo, I choose not to. I'm also not going to discuss Federation Force or any feelings about that, simply because I haven't played it, and I feel it kind of unfair to harshly judge something without giving it the time of day. The only real thought I can express is, it looks fun, I guess. I've heard some people say they liked it, but considering my own lack of interest in shooters in general, it was never really on my radar. Would I like to see a more traditional Metroid game come out for modern systems? Absolutely, but we'll get to that. At any rate, I like the game. Quite a lot, actually. While I don't have a ton of experience with the original version of Metroid 2, I have purchased it, and I've played it enough to say, it's okay. Not my favorite Metroid game, but I like it more than the first. The pre-Super titles are a little bit harder for me to go back to because they haven't aged super well, and I don't have a lot of nostalgic connection to them, so while I can appreciate what they did for the time, the series has since gone to better places that I would rather go. Because of my lack of extensive experience and knowledge of the original game, I can't really say much about the remake's status beyond I'd much rather be playing the remake. The additions of a difficulty selection, new power-ups, more visually distinct areas, and an ever-present map make the game much more enjoyable and accessible in my opinion, and I like how the game itself looks and sounds like I would imagine a 2D Metroid title would look and sound if it were released today. In particular, I like how everything, from enemies being frozen, machines being destroyed, or Samus getting knocked every which way while fighting certain enemies, has weight. While I do sort of miss being able to use frozen enemies as platforms, and while Samus getting knocked around can get kind of annoying, more on that later, these extra touches make everything feel like the logical translation of the 3D Metroid Prime games on a two-dimensional plane, which is really cool. This sort of polish is what makes me really hope that the creators behind this project can go on to more games, should they choose to do so. I also like the little winks and nods to the rest of the Metroid franchise, including the Prime series. I was shocked and unreasonably giddy the first time I saw the logbook entry notification appear on my screen when entering a new area or fighting a boss. Again, it's the extra polish that makes the experience that much better. If I could think of one thing to complain about, it would be the fact that some bosses had more health than I would personally like. But I can also chalk that up to me sucking at the game, so take that with a grain of salt. Another thing, returning to more realistic physics, is how easy it is to get stun locked by certain enemies, namely Zeta and Omega Metroids, and get knocked about because of how short Samus's post-hit invulnerability is. Again, the easy solution is not getting hit, but getting stuck in a corner by Zeta or Omegas, which is really easy to do in their battle arenas in most cases, kinda gets annoying. Honestly though, considering I was having so much fun with the rest of the game, and considering the game's free price point and the polish seen elsewhere in the game, these gripes sort of get a pass. But as I said before, are something to keep in mind for future projects, which, as I said, I would really like to see happen. Which leads me to address the other elephant in the room, the future of the Metroid series. In a perfect world, honestly other people have said it before, but Nintendo would have hired this team to clean up the game for release on its own hardware, but they've chosen not to for whatever reason. Couple that with Federation Force's shaky reception and Other M's entire existence, Nintendo probably isn't sure what to do with the Metroid series anymore, not unlike problems a certain Blue Hedgehog has been dealing with for the past few years. Money talks, and unfortunately, while it indeed does talk more loudly, it doesn't talk as clearly as response and reviews, and considering how much of a mixed bag fan response can be, I can see why Nintendo isn't sure what to do. This is all made worse by Federation Force, since either with a good or bad reception, It would probably lead the series in a direction fans wouldn't want as much. Good sales numbers for Federation Force would be translated as, okay, fans want more of this, while bad sales numbers would be interpreted as, okay, so you didn't want this spin-off, you didn't want Other M, what do you guys want? The obvious answer being something a little bit more traditionally Metroid, but I digress. While I can't say I know what direction the series is going to go now, I do have some ideas of what I would personally like to see. For instance, Other M did have a lot of good ideas, and I like what it was trying to do, but I'd be lying to myself and others if I said those ideas were implemented particularly well. Some were, but I wouldn't mind seeing some things from that cleared up. I like having Samus be more three-dimensional, actually acknowledging her own motives, fears, goals, and thoughts, and while these were decently implied in the Prime series, I like seeing Samus as a more realistic character. Problem is, Other M made her too fearful. Finding a decent middle ground there would be a good place to start. Related to that, in terms of story and presentation, another obvious answer is better writing, directing, and acting. I'm not in the camp that thinks voice-acted cutscenes are out of place in games such as Metroid, and when done well, I think they add a lot to the experience. When they're done well. Which I suppose has a few directions it could go, depending on how much Samus ends up working with other characters in the story. But all this doesn't matter if the game holding it together isn't very good. So as far as an answer to the problems facing control and combat in an Other M-esque Metroid game, obviously the use of analog sticks would be helpful. Controlling a character on a 3D plane with a D-pad works, but it's hardly efficient, and analog sticks are an easy solution. I also didn't mind the auto-aim, but it could be retooled a bit, perhaps with a lock-on feature similar to the current Zelda games. I also like the dodge roll mechanic, but it deserves its own button to ensure that it actually works when you need it to. Which isn't to say I had a ton of problems with it in Other M, but having its own button could reduce not a lot of problems to no problems. There is also the obvious answer of making the game a lot less linear, but everyone else has already talked about that, so I'm not going to go into more detail on that. Admittedly, I'm not sure what to do with first-person mode, besides toggling it with the push of a button and letting you move around with either twin-stick or gyroscope controls, or not having it at all. Either way, missile use outside of first-person mode would be super nice, perhaps even with the aforementioned lock-on system so you can avoid wasting missiles. Anyway, those are just a few ideas, and I don't want my video to overstay its welcome. Thanks to those of you who stuck it out though, and I want to know your own thoughts in the comments. What would you like to see in a future Metroid title? And if you liked the video, feel free to give it a like or subscribe to the channel. Anyway, thanks for tuning in and have a good day.